Welcome to the Growth Whisperers podcast, where Brad Giles and Kevin Lawrence, that's myself and my great co-host, continually talk about building enduring great companies. Why? Because we like to, and we believe in it, and we think building an enduring great company is a noble, wonderful, and amazing thing to do. And building a company for a few years is, well, just maybe a different game to play. But today's show, we wanted to start off by wishing you a happy new year. We are now officially in 2023, and I'm sure it's going to be an interesting year, and I hope it is an awesome year for you both at work and in your life as well. Kevin Lawrence, again, my co-host Brad Giles here, kicking off the show. So Brad, what's the word or phrase of the day for you?
Hello, Kev. It's good to be here, and a happy new year to our listeners. I hope that 2023 is treating you as it should. Word of the day, I guess renewal. You get to this time of the year and you can't help but maybe not, set new goals or big goals, but just feel a sense of renewal. Like, okay, I've closed out last year. Everything is done. I'm in a rest period, perhaps for many people, and I'm beginning to look at the next year. Just renewal. That's mine. What about yours, Kev?
It's simplicity. Simplicity is one of the most important things in business and life, and usually there's a few simple things that matter most, and keeping it really simple. Even in our goal setting tool that we use, it's the top one or two things in any given time frame that relate to your work or for yourself or in your life. So simple and keeping it really simple, and simple is hard. And so, yeah, it reminds me of that quote I've shared before by Mark Twain. I would have written you a shorter letter, but I didn't have the time. Because simplicity is hard. Simplicity takes mastery and a bunch of extra effort, but then it keeps things easier to scale, easier to win, all that other stuff. So simplicity. So simple, what you used, renewal.
Simple
Simplicity of renewal or renewal. I don't think those mash together. There's probably a great way to mash them together. It's not coming to me right now.
Well, it plays into the theme of today's episode, which is like renew, focus on execution, and make it simple.
Yes. And as we know with the simplicity scales, we're just talking about this episode of execution. If it's not simple, it's really hard to execute consistently, repeatedly by lots of different people. So we're continuing this series we have about setting ourselves up to win in 2023. And as we've covered in the last couple episodes, we've gone through 2022 and 2021, and 2022 were kind of strange years. And we're looking forward, and we're excited to be looking forward. But, we want to be prepared to maximize most what unfolds over the 12 months of this year and the coming few years. And depending on where you are in your segment, there's all kinds of interesting stuff. So today, it's all about execution. And I'll start off with a quote, in one of our sessions that we have with Jim Collins. He said, at the end of the day, creativity is part of human nature. It's actually pretty common, pretty easy. But discipline is the mastery. And he has a quote that success comes from relentless execution of the boring basics, particularly those that fit within your hedgehog principle. So that's what we're talking about today, is relentless execution of the disciplines that really make a difference in your business. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Brad.
It's interesting. I spent a lot of time, many, many years with entrepreneurs, and I've been an entrepreneur, started many companies, right? The things that make you successful as an entrepreneur is your creativity. Okay.
Yes.
But that creativity, it needs to be fed, and it needs to be fed in a way that you need to keep being creative. And the brain that creates that business, that entrepreneurial flair, doesn't like the boring basics. And then that's the real challenge. And that's why execution is actually so hard, because the entrepreneurs who build these businesses, once they get a bit of momentum, they're like, oh, but I want to go and do something fun. And they chase the shiny objects that kind of pop up. And it can be a real challenge. It can be a real challenge.
And that's why a lot of entrepreneurs don't scale. There is a massive majority of entrepreneurs that start something up that don't get past $1 million in revenue. Never mind 10, because they are incredibly creative, but they often lack the discipline or haven't figured out how to hire the people who have the discipline to be able to run and drive those things over and over and over again.
Yeah, and it's fun. It's fun chasing the shiny things. It's fun to,
it's not very profitable, and it doesn't build a great company, but it's sure entertaining.
But just understanding it matters, and understanding why execution is so fundamentally important.
It is, and your point is it's hard for a lot of entrepreneurs, and even a lot of real senior leaders don't generally have the brains who love doing the same thing over and over and over again. That's a different type of personality style. And even myself, that's why I've got lots of people around me who are wonderful at consistent execution, where I am more of an ideas person and have that entrepreneurial mind. It's a great way to look at it. So if we look at, if you're looking at watching sports and whatever it happens to be, it's wonderful to watch athletes do things really, really well. It's very impressive. They make it look easy. But the reality is, the reason that they can do it so well at game time or performance time is because of the hours and hours and dozens and hundreds of hours of practice and repetition, again and again and again and again and again. Again, that's that relentless discipline to master pieces.
It is, and I'm glad you brought up sports. There's a common saying that many people use when it comes to planning, and execution is the output of planning, right? This is how we execute, and that is, it's everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face, and it's accredited to Mike Tyson, the boxer, and that's fine. And
I love that quote.
It's very cool to say that, right? And it's like, yeah, we don't need plans. We're too tough for that, right? But when you actually look at that story as a reference point, he was being asked by a journalist as he was going to that fight, aren't you worried about Evander Holyfield, who you're going to fight, and his plans? Like, his plans are notoriously good, and that's why he's got such a great win record. And of course, we know what Tyson said in response. He said, everyone's got a plan till they get punched in the mouth. A very tough kind of, thing to say as a boxer. But he went on to lose that fight. Okay, that's the brutal reality of it. But then there was a rematch, and the planning won again. Okay, because Evander Holyfield went in with a plan. Now, his plan didn't include Mike Tyson in the second fight is going to bite my ear off. Okay, bite a big chunk of his ear off and then spit it on the mat, and then bite the other ear. But he had his plan, and he executed, and he stuck to it, and he won the second fight, the rematch. So it's all good and well to say these things and to say planning doesn't matter and execution doesn't matter, but execution is where the battle is won.
It is. And it's interesting, that Mike Tyson quote. I love that quote. I'm just gonna forget what you said because it blew up that quote in my mind. I looked at it, and I know that you're right. I looked at it as, it's why you need to be willing to iterate and change your plan. I take it as, I've used it in context, you need to have a solid base plan and be ready to make changes.
It's not that you're wrong. It's that there's a better iteration of that story, which is the Evander Holyfield side, which is he had a plan. He had his ear bitten off. He adapted the plan. He stuck to the plan. He adapted, and then he won.
I got it. I like it. And I see. I didn't have the rest of the context. I like the context I made up in my mind about the quote made it sound brilliant, but apparently it isn't. So we're always learning. So it's interesting in all of these things is that the discipline is the hard part. Yeah. The ideas are easy. Ideas are a dime a dozen. And for a lot of people, they get caught up in ideas and creativity. And it's not. It was just this interesting note. I read this book about artists and creative people. Do you know, we have this vision of artists and they sit and wait till they're inspired to paint or to write. That is so far from the truth. It's not funny. All of these the successful one, obviously the unsuccessful people have no discipline. Sure, they wait to be inspired, but they probably wait their whole life. The successful ones had hardcore disciplines. The painters had to paint 4 hours a day. The writers had to write 1,000 words, and it went on and on and on. Every single one of the famous, highly successful artists or creative people were hardcore disciplined. That's why they were successful. They worked incredibly hard and incredibly consistency. So look, we know creativity is fun. and brainstorming and all that's fun, but it's execution. There's, just as a side note on that, if you look at, Southwest Airlines, which has been and continues to be one of the most successful airlines in the world. I was driving down in the US the other day and saw one fly over, and was always reminded that they're a great airline. They're a knockoff. Somebody else invented the concept. They took the playbook and actually got the manuals from the company and just executed what they had better than the airline that they copied. Literally. Walmart. Sam Walton, and I was listening to this great story about Sam Walton. All Sam Walton did is constantly went around to all the other retailers and listened and looked for their innovations and made them happen in his stores. I just listened to this great story about how Sam heard back in the day about another retailer who had a different checkout system.
Yeah.
There used to be department-based checkouts, and this person had figured out how you just channel everyone through one exit and there's one cashier or one point of cash, and how there was great efficiency. So he took a bus in a day. It was a 4 or 5 hour bus ride he had to take to go to this other town to go and see this. And that's what he did his whole career. He just kept copying the best ideas. You could say it sounded as if that he didn't have a creative bone in his body. He would just go steal the best ideas and implement them. And again, that's not, I want to respect what he built. I'm not disrespecting him. He was a master of execution. And it was even through talking with some of these other retailers, he started to get the idea about how logistics was going to be the core, because he could see it from talking to these other people. So again, execution.
That's interesting. 2 points very quickly. There's a YouTube movie called Everything is a Remix. And it's fascinating. I don't know if you've seen it before, but yeah, definitely worth a check out. Everything is a remix. It just tells a story that there are no genuine ideas. You look at something like Star Wars or whatever it is, like all of these things are stitched together from all of these other ideas that are stitched together from other ideas. The second point, the number one hardware retailer in Australia is a company called Bunnings, and Bunnings executives, Bunnings originally came from Perth, and Bunnings executives flew to America, a whole, I would say not a busload, but let's say 5 to 10 of them. And they would drive into one Walmart and then a Home Depot. They would take as many photos as they can and then get back in the car when they got kicked out and then drive to that one, took as many photos as they can until they got kicked out and just kept on driving, then captured their images, came back and just executed well. And now they've got, I would guess, 70 to 80% of the retail hardware market because they understood and they executed extremely well.
Yeah, and truly, if you look at any well-run company, high-performing company, it's execution. It's not luck. It's not creativity. So the root of it, there's lots of basics of execution that we're very passionate about. And, and generally there are kind of 3 categories. There's execution of goals, or what's important around goals. Execution, having data so you can tell what is actually working or not, like to give you a sense of you're on track. And then meetings to help make sure people stay focused on it. So having goals, having data to tell us we're doing on the goals, and then having meetings where people align around what they need to do. Again, it's not rocket science.
And that's where excellent execution comes from, those 3 things. So if you're looking into 2023 and thinking, how can I win? Like, that's where we've got to get better, and that's where the opportunities lie.
Yeah, and take some ideas. And it's interesting, we were chatting before the show, but when we go into companies and we need to go and help them improve their performance, generally the greatest impact is tightening up execution, because execution gets loose. A company that I've been working with throughout this year, really good company, doing a lot of things well. They had a lot of stuff, but they got a little distracted along the way. And when I went back in, they said, we really need help whipping this thing back into shape. So I said, okay. I started looking at the execution disciplines. There's a couple questions around strategy, but we looked at the execution disciplines. They were gone.
Yeah.
They had them. It's like, they were gone, and people were lost, and the meetings weren't focused on the goals. The data was confusing. The goals weren't clear. It's like, well, no wonder.
Yep.
They just stopped doing the things. It's like, if you stopped brushing your teeth, you're going to start to notice some funny things over time, right? Or if you stopped bathing or having a shower, and bathing and brushing your teeth, those are execution disciplines that create certain results.
Yeah, that's what I always say. It's like brushing your teeth. We got to keep doing it. And you shouldn't question it. Like, this is how we execute well. We've got the right meetings, the right data, the right goals and priorities.
Right. So as some example, I mean, again, there's executions. There's all kinds of executions that count, of the goals, of the talent reviews, checking on the organizational health, financial reviews, quarterly retreats, quarterly celebrations, monthly business reviews, weekly execution reviews, all that good stuff. But one company that I have done some work with, and they were really, really doing well, but somehow particularly on the people piece of it, they got focused on building an amazing culture and having everyone love coming to their job. And they lost their discipline around people. And they lost the execution disciplines around people, around the strong discipline on hiring, strong discipline on when we make a promotion, let's double or quadruple check we're making the right move. The disciplines around talent reviews and assessing existing talent, it almost all disappeared and became nice, sweet, but not an actual business execution review. And the team got bigger than it needed to be, less accountable than it needed to be, wrong mix of people, like all kinds of stuff. And these are good people. They took their eye off the ball on the execution. And next thing you know, they've got serious people problems. And they actually by trying to create such a great culture, but because they took their eye off discipline, or the discipline of execution, they made the culture worse.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you know, the thing is, right, what is the output of poor execution? Go back to, if you haven't got your meetings humming, if you haven't got everybody knowing the right priorities and goals, and if you haven't got everyone getting the right metrics, what happens is the profit doesn't fall to the bottom line, right? So it's a direct...
Because stuff doesn't get done.
Stuff doesn't get done efficiently and effectively.
Correct. Yeah, things slow down. They take more time, more money, or more mistakes. Like the machine slows down. It's like if you're driving on the highway at 120 kilometers an hour and you take your eye off the throttle, and actually next thing you know, you're going 70. Yeah. Just slow the whole machine, although people are still working hard and think they're working hard.
If you're in a company crisis, what would you do? Okay, we've got to have the right goals. We've got to have the right numbers so that we know where we're heading, and we've got to have the right meetings so that we can synchronize. So there's no reason that you shouldn't be doing that all the time to execute effectively. That's execution.
Yeah. It's just hard to stay focused on. And it's interesting. I'm just, in December celebrated with one of my clients who, we built this company over 11 years. I've been a part of working with them for 11 years, and great organization, really good people leading it, care deeply, strong purpose, great core values, all the right things. But the reality is we had 45 meetings every 90 days over 11 years, resetting the disciplines. It was a discipline meeting, a very awesome, creative CEO, excellent executives, but we would review, how are we doing on the financials versus target? How do we do better? How are we doing in terms of people in our key roles? How are they doing? How do we help them to do better or get better people? How are we doing on the operational KPIs versus expectations? What do we got to keep an eye on? Where are the gaps in the business? And we would go through this again and again and again, quarter on quarter on quarter. And over time, we made lots of mistakes, lots of errors. And we never have, it's not like the team is perfect, but we consistently have better strategy, better execution of the quarterly goals throughout the organization, better alignment, stronger culture, higher percentage of A players on the team. And, the amount that this company grew is incredible because it's become an execution machine. And the value creation over 11 years is dramatic, right? And they sold a big part of it to a capital partner, and it's a spectacular. But it's we have a very good team doing very good stuff with an incredible focus on execution that gets reset every 90 days without fail, and we get better and better and better and better and better. And but when you do the same thing over and over 44 times, and they were doing it before they met with me, probably 60 times, they have had that hardcore quarterly discipline for 2 days a quarter, 3 days every annual. And it's kind of hard to not win if you continually dial the execute. It's hard. It's actually really hard it's hard to lose.
It's hard to not win. That's exactly right. Because you just come back and you reset And I mean, you and I do it with our firms, and we get that same feeling that everybody does that we work with, which is, yeah, like I'm really clear on what I'm going into and why it matters and where to go.
Yes.
Yeah.
And because we get lost in the quarter. Stuff comes up, stuff changes, we get distracted. We need mechanisms to help us stay focused on doing the jobs that matter most.
And that's why we advocate coaches, external coaches, let's be fair, because the external coach is the one that has the incentive to make the meetings and the discipline occur. And that fundamental catalyst drives that. You know, there's one...
We're like the taskmasters, basically, to help people make sure they stay focused and don't end up on a creative idea chasing event,
which is incredibly expensive. So there's one team that I know of, and they were amazing at execution. Like, just, they were absolute best practice. If you wrote a book about them, they'd have to be, you know, one of their stories would have to be in there. But then they dropped the weekly meetings. I don't know, they got busy or something happened, and you know, next thing you know, they stopped executing well, and the numbers just massively shifted. And then they're like, oh, there's a crisis. We've got to move. And it's like, well, if you stop doing the weekly meetings, you're not going to be executing well. People won't be realigning and resetting.
Yes, it's human nature. So there's lots of different examples. The main thing that, you know, that to have a great year this coming year or this year is just to make sure that the most important execution disciplines are tight. And, you know, really, if we were to dig into it, the things that we see that really matter, those quarterly meetings are critical, where we're reviewing the numbers, the KPIs, the goals, and the team, right? And that's that. Those are in my mind really, really critical. It makes all the difference in the world. But for, you know, another company I work with, what they found for them is that the weekly meeting was the hardest one. The quarterly meeting, they got an outside coach, you know, from my team that works with them. But the weekly is where people often get lost.
Yeah.
And by nature, a lot of people's weekly meeting becomes a weekly troubleshooting or a weekly discussion meeting, not a weekly execution meeting, meaning the weekly meeting to make sure we execute our goals, right? That we get those most important priorities for that quarter complete. And people talk about all kinds of other stuff. And there's always random other stuff to talk about, hot topics, all kinds of stuff. But if you don't come back and get focused on your goals, people get lost and forget what they're supposed to do, and it's hard to get them done.
Well, we're 7/13 of the way through the 13-week quarter, for example. We're in week 7 out of 13. Right. How's your plan going for that priority? Or, you know, an update on where we're at. Are we likely to achieve that by the end of the quarter? That's what we're really talking about. What's going on in the metrics or the KPIs? We green across your KPIs? Is your team working? All of those come back in and realign. And if we come back and all we're talking about is operations and what's happening on the projects or the jobs or whatever industry we're in, and we're not working on the business at the weekly meeting to track those things, it's gonna end in lower levels of execution and therefore lower levels of effective profit.
And to be clear, from my perspective, the one thing that's usually wrong about most weekly meetings is they don't spend 10 minutes to review the progress of the quarterly goals that we have agreed to. The top 3 to 5 goals or priorities or rocks, whatever you want to call them, that we don't spend 10 minutes saying, hey, what progress did we make last week? What are we going to do this week? And is there anything that we're stuck on we might need assistance with? Yeah. That one thing I personally believe is the most important piece of that weekly meeting. And most people miss it because it's a discipline. It's the flossing your teeth of the business world, and a lot of people don't do it well, and constantly need to reset on it.
Yeah, indeed. Good chat. I guess what we're saying here then to begin to summarize is, if you want to win in 2023, you've got to get your execution right, and that means that as you analyze those 3 areas, have you got the right priorities or goals for the business, for each person, for each department, for each period, e.g. week, quarter, year? Have you got the right metrics and data so that people can predict and delegate, so that people make the right decisions? And then finally, have you got the right meetings? Now, you know that we advocate daily huddles, weekly, monthly, quarterly and annual meetings in a very kind of structured format. What of those things are you not doing well? And then as you look to 2023, which of those things can you do better, or the opportunity to execute better?
Pretty straightforward, easy to say, and hard to do consistently over and over and over and over and over again and again and again.
But awesome. That's how you get what you really want.
And yes. And whether it's in sport, as an artist, in business, it doesn't matter. Or if you're a woodworker and you want to master a certain type of wood carving, it's all the same. Relentless execution, practice, consistently doing the few things that matter absolutely most.
Indeed. Very good. So this has been the Growth Whisperers. My name is Brad Giles in Perth, Australia, and Kevin Lawrence, my co-host here in Vancouver, Canada. You can find us on YouTube if you prefer to see our smiling faces, just by searching the Growth Whisperers on the YouTube, and obviously like and subscribe us if you're listening to the podcast. We always like a new subscriber and welcome them, and welcome any input you can find us. And if you've got any questions that you'd like us to cover, we'd love to do that. You can find Kevin at lawrenceandco.com, and you can find myself at evolutionpartners.com.au. And of course, we've both got weekly newsletters that are packed full of interesting things around this subject. Thanks for listening. It's been great to have your company. I hope that you are enjoying your new year, your New Year's Day, and I hope that you have a great day and a great break before getting into 2023. Have a good one. Look forward to chatting to you next week.